You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. My guest today is Jay Campbell. We're going to talk about how to break free from the failing sick care system. It's an illusion to the healthcare system, but I agree. He's the author and co-founder of BioLongevity Labs. So he's a 5-time international best-selling author, a men's physique champion, and like I said, owner and co-founder of BioLongevity Labs. So welcome, Jay. Thanks for coming.
Richard, what's going on, brother? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, tell me a bit about your background. Usually people in health and healthcare and, that kind of stuff, they have their own personal struggles in the past. So what's your backstory there?
So really no personal struggles. I've always been an athlete in my life. I played college basketball at Division II level in the NCAA. And then when I got out of school, about 8 years post-college, I was playing in adult men's basketball league. And I got kicked in the testicles playing in the league. And, I checked myself out, keeled over. It was like, And about 7 to 8 weeks later, I started feeling really, really run down. And at the time I was living in Southern California in Pasadena, and I went to, I was working as an advertising salesperson for the Los Angeles Times. I went to, a local PPO doctor within my insurance. And the doctor recommended me to an endocrinologist because he said, someone your health and age shouldn't be feeling the way you did. So, as I like to think in the world, there are really no coincidences, only synchronicities. The guy ended up being like a Harvard-educated, pretty world-renowned endocrinologist that I was referred to. And when he saw me, he took my labs and he saw that I had the testosterone levels of what he said was a geriatric person, in their 80s, and that, someone like me should have much higher levels. And he told me he could put me on therapeutic testosterone and that I would be, as he exactly said it, right as rain within 8 weeks later. So at that time, at 29, I was just maybe a couple months short of turning 30. He said, go home, talk to your fiance and ask if you guys are okay with this, because, a lot of people sometimes aren't. And so we did, and she was. And so I started taking therapeutic testosterone. And just as he said, like 8 weeks later, I felt a million times better. And he wanted to take me off. And I was absolutely against it because I was like, this is transformative for me. So at that point, I just became this really, prolific, voracious student of hormone optimization. And at the same time, I was basically experimenting on myself with peptides and all sorts of other things that at that time were completely underground and nobody knew what they were. And it really gave me this, I would say, over the next 10 to 12, 15 years, a mastery of the subject material, which then led me to write my book and to become whatever the hell I am now. When people my daughters ask me what I do, I say I'm an online gypsy. I just mistakenly have, revenue and income come to me from all corners of the globe. And I also say that I'm my accountant's worst nightmare.
Funny. Yeah, I started taking testosterone shots probably about 10 years ago when I was 40. And it wasn't just, the sexual desire that increases, but it felt like I was probably about 30% smarter. I felt more motivated. I could think better. And just like I said, I felt a heck of a lot smarter. I felt great. And I ran into some issues like the carrier oils causing lumps. And so I tried like the pellets and the creams and different things. But testosterone replacement really was a big time game changer for myself too.
Yeah. And honestly, it is for really everyone. There's minor, call it bumps in the road like you just experienced, but most people look at testosterone or, call it therapeutic testosterone as life altering. They look at their life as pre and before, because everything you said is exactly right. I mean, it improves dopamine signaling. It does a lot of really amazing things. And, the cognitive increase that you noticed is usually the first thing. And I tell people that a lot. Unfortunately, our medical system does not treat hormonal deficiencies like it should, because it's wholly ignorant of them. You really do. And as you probably found out, you have to go to a specialist who really understands this thing, because they don't learn anything about hormones in the standard of care in medical school or anything like that. So almost all doctors that do prescribe hormones have learned, through an experiential body of work and practice. And so it's like, you can't just go to a general GP or a family doctor and expect them to be able to hormonally optimize you, because they can't.
Well, one thing I learned, if anyone's in a relationship, you do need to talk to both people, because if one, let's say, I don't know, you're a couple that is barely having sex and now all of a sudden one of the people is like bugging them every day. It can ruin the relationship. So when I first went to this clinic, I was like, hey, you get the partners in, and they're like, no. I was like, okay. Because again, strained relationships that really cause problems.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, there's no reason that anyone who's aging should, one spouse or one significant other should be on hormones and the other shouldn't. It doesn't really make any sense because you're going to leave the other one behind. I mean, it's a deep conversation and rabbit hole, but, I personally think that anyone, who's 35 or 40 or, even older, should look into hormone optimization because it really is, in my opinion, the fountain of youth. I mean, it keeps people younger. It keeps people virile. It keeps people, if they're obviously focused on living an optimized life, as I call it, it's really the gateway to just longevity.
So let's start with men. What's involved in optimizing their hormones? Is it just testosterone or what else, might they need?
I mean, it's a lot of things, man. Hormone optimization is much more than just using therapeutic testosterone. You have to live what I call a fully optimized life, which is, relatively insulin controlled. Obviously, you have to exercise. You should be doing a combination of resistance training or some form of bone bearing training, along with cardiovascular training to improve the vasculature in the heart as you get older. Like I said, living insulin controlled, so you regulate your carbohydrate consumption so that you're, not having too much body fat or too high of levels of inflammation, which obviously is, crushing because it causes insulin resistance. And then insulin resistance is really, I guess you would call the progenitor for most forms of disease on this planet. So if you do all those things and then you obviously add in therapeutic testosterone, whether you're a man or a woman, there's other stuff you can add to it. Obviously, you can talk about using growth hormone agonist peptides like testosterone, ipamorelin, CJC. Or you could use, the real thing itself, which is obviously human growth hormone. And all of these things, have to be dosed in what I consider a micro or surgically precise microdose fashion. But they're very synergistic with one another. So if someone uses therapeutic testosterone, they should probably look into using, like I said, therapeutic growth hormone. If they can't get growth hormone, look into growth hormone agonist peptides. But there's a lot of other things. I mean, obviously, when you do this, you have to get labs. You have to work with a physician that knows what they're doing and knows what labs to pull. And obviously looking at your labs, if you have a deficit or a deficiency, in a specific biomarker, there are supplements and, I guess you would call them ergogens that can enhance or optimize some of the biomarkers if they're lagging.
Makes sense. Okay. So what is when people come to you and they want help, like what state are they in? What are they complaining about, man or woman? What's like a typical avatar of a person that you help?
Yeah. I mean, it's all ages and all gamuts. I mean, I'm not personally, I don't coach men or anything like that. I mean, I have in the past. I have a private membership group, which is pretty big now, over 700 men and women. And most of those people that are in that group are in there looking to obviously optimize their hormones, live, from a standpoint of like, how do I use peptides? How do I master using peptides? How do I use bioregulators? I mean, it's a very elite group of people looking, as I like to say, biohack their best selves or, live at the tip of the spear or live, in a fully optimized way. But, most of the people that, would come into that group or that would be interested in following the information that I have are looking to, really extend their life. I like to say live longer and stronger. I honestly think that, if people take care of themselves, there's no doubt that you can live into your early hundreds and still live, rather robustly and vigorously. But again, you have to put the work in. There's no magic pills, even therapeutic testosterone, peptides, human growth hormone, stuff like that. None of that is magic. I mean, if you're not doing any work around it and just taking those things, you're not going to see any effect of any benefit at all.
Oh, so you need to combine it with good diet, exercise, all that stuff to really see the benefit.
Absolutely.
Maybe you should wear a shirt that says you're like 250 years old. Yeah. How do I look?
Well, when people see my wife and I, because we're extremely fit people, they usually think that we are 20 years younger. But I mean, I'm 54, my wife is 53, and we definitely look like we're in our 20s.
That's great. It's fantastic.
I practice what I preach is what I like to say,
Yeah. So how does, if someone's coming from not exercising and just, really stressful life, but they're not eating well and they're not really doing anything right, and they come to you for help, what comes first? What comes next? How is it not overwhelming for people to help themselves?
Well, it's definitely overwhelming for people in today's day and age, because the majority of people that are found online that talk about, this kind of stuff are not experts. They've been in the game for 6 months to a year, and they they mimic and regurgitate what they hear about other people. And, what I like to say is that the signal to noise ratio on the internet right now is almost all noise and very little signal. Thankfully, there's still a signal out there, but you better understand how to find the signal. But if somebody comes to me, well, first off, nobody comes to me who's a physical disaster, because I don't attract those type of people. I attract people who are already on the path, but want to be the most elite of them. But if somebody came to me who was a disaster, I would call them like a human dumpster fire, because I kind of make jokes about that on my email list every now and then. I would tell them the first step is they have to get their biomarkers measured. They have to go to a lab. I have relationships with different companies. One of them is Private MD Labs, and I have like 4 different lab panels that a person can pull. But you always have to understand what's going on underneath the hood before you can actually fix what's maybe on the external. So, once you get your biomarkers looked at, you can understand, what the issues are. Then I can make a recommendation or refer you to a physician that can help you, begin to optimize, from a step 1 standpoint. And then obviously from there, based on your biomarkers, based on what, you would technically qualify for, because again, whenever you start hormones, you obviously have to have a clinical need to get a prescription from a physician. So at that point, then we can kind of make recommendations on like, okay, like let's say you have a high inflammatory markers, you have too much body fat, you have insulin resistance, all these different things. Then we can really put a program together that can really like have you take, one bite at the apple at a time.
Okay, so biomarkers first, and then, when the work begins, what does the work look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. The work is first, again, changing your diet. Anybody who's not healthy, their diet sucks. I mean, that's going to be rule number 1. They're not eating healthy. They're not eating correctly. They're not eating enough protein. They're probably not eating enough. They're not drinking enough water. They're not getting enough, essential minerals or vitamins or things like that. So it's always going to be the first biggest rock, so to speak, would be, looking at their diet, making, advising them to change their diet, to live insulin control, regulate their carbohydrate consumption, get enough protein. And then at the same time that you're doing that, you're hopefully with the therapeutic hormones and perhaps growth hormone, peptides, you can get them with enough energy that they can start exercising. So it's a combination of all those things. And it's not easy. I mean, most people fail. I mean, 73% of adults in America today over the age of 40 are obese. So it's a mess. It's getting worse. We live in a day of instant gratification world where most people are unwilling to put the work in because they can just push a button on their phone and have the food show up at their house, or have their hygiene products or their toiletries or whatever come in Instacart or whatever. So a lot of people today just don't really exercise. They don't move. But, if you want to live longer and stronger, and you obviously, are into improving your longevity factors and your biomarkers, you got to move.
Okay. Do you see that after a certain age or in a certain circumstance, it's really, really hard to get started, or?
No. I mean, anyone can do this. It just requires willpower and desire. I mean, there's tons of, scientific studies and peer review, stuff out there that shows that somebody in their 70s who's never lifted a weight in their life can, add 10 to 15 pounds of muscle in 6 months if they show up and put the work in. Now, obviously the work that's required, has to be what I would consider scientifically based, like a weightlifting or resistance program that is, what I call progressive overload. So it's designed so that, every time you show up, you challenge your body or you challenge your performance a little bit more than you did the previous session. But anyone can build muscle. Anyone can lose fat. Anyone can get healthy, at any age. It just, like I said, it requires desire and it requires action.
Okay. And have there been people that you couldn't help, even though, they tried, you tried? Have there been, any circumstance in which you couldn't make a big difference?
No, because I'm smart enough to not take on people that I know aren't going to put the work in. So, I've had, I'm very blessed where I'm at in my level of life. I've had people that have sold companies for, 10 figures, 9 figures, and they've come to me and they've said, I have any amount of money, I'll pay you any amount of money. I need a 90-day program. And I laugh in their face and I say, I'm not taking your money. You don't have enough money because you spent 50 years or 45 years or 38 years or whatever of your life becoming a human dumpster fire. And there's no 90-day program that's going to unwind all the damage you've done to yourself. So, I'm not the right guy for you. And then I just send them on their way. So I rarely take on people that I know are not going to, put the work in and create change in their life. And very, very truthfully, Richard, the way it works is this: until a person can look in the mirror and love and trust themselves and feel worthy of changing to whatever the change is going to be. And in this instance, we're talking about obviously to get better fit, to extend your life from a longevity standpoint. It doesn't matter what you tell them. It doesn't matter what information you give them, how much knowledge you have. They will default back to the state that they ultimately feel, which is no love and trust of self. So regardless of, any space that a person's in from a fitness standpoint, until you can actually help a person find worth, they're always going to default to their default state, which is essentially, again, they don't trust and love themselves. So if they're out of shape, they're going to go back to being out of shape. Even if they get fit, even if you get them on a program and they spend 90 to 120 days doing all the work, if they haven't actually gotten to the point where they worked on their inner self, they're going to still end up going back to their old habits and old behaviors and become the same person. And I've seen that in so many people over life that I just, like I said, now I realize that that's the first step is, okay, are you committed to changing your behaviors, at a fundamental root level versus like getting all excited about, getting on kind of 90-day or 120-day plan or something like that, which is unfortunately what a lot of the stuff that's promulgated on the internet today. You see these things like 60-day hard or 90-day hard or any of these things. And it's like, none of those things are going to help people, because even if those people do those programs, if they haven't worked on themselves and why they are, they're going to default back to that state. It happens 99.9% of the time.
Really that much?
I mean, I could tell you 100% of the time, but I'm sure there's, a variation and an outlier. But yes, I mean, if you don't find yourself worthy, you will never, ever change who you are. You will go back to the default state of unworthy, don't love and trust of self. That's how it works. 100%.
What is the inner work that look like for people? Do you guys do it, or they get a counselor? Or like, what do they?
No. Inner work is literally looking in the mirror and being ready to find who and what you are, right? Whether it's meditation, introspection, contemplation, it definitely doesn't have anything to do with hiring somebody or a counselor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or anything like that. It's literally working on your inner self, because as I like to say, the way out is within. You really have to understand who and what you are. And we're so much more than these bodies, man. I mean, like these bodies, obviously we exist here in third density or whatever this is, the third dimension, but like we're so much more than the physical body. We're energy. We're literally vibrating atoms and oscillating waves of energy inside these physical bodies. And yeah, these physical bodies are going to die, but what encompasses you from a soul, spiritual, energy level doesn't die. I mean, energy, if you understand, energy cannot be contracted or contained. It's infinite. It's ever expanding. So whatever we are as energy is ultimately like what we have to work on our inner portion. So again, like it can be a lot of different things. I mean, it can be sitting in nature by yourself in the morning and really reflecting on your thoughts. It could be meditation. For me, I like to be very introspective. I like to go to a quiet place. It's usually in my backyard with my dog and just sit there and be alone with my thoughts and, not let what I call the drunk monkey, which is obviously your ego, drown out the thoughts, and just get to a place of sheer stillness, or, what I like to say also is mind silence. And then just at that point, really focus on what it is that I ultimately want to create. And at that point, once you have that understanding or that awareness of like the desire of what you want to create, I feel like you have a much clearer understanding or a bigger picture of what your purpose is here as a person or as a human.
That makes sense. So who would make a good client for you? Who wouldn't? Again, someone willing to do the work, do whatever it takes, or does it go beyond that?
It's got to be someone willing to do the work. But like I said, I mean, I don't really invest time in coaching people. My group, we answer questions. There's a lot of subject matter experts in my group. I've coached people in the past. I offer one-on-one consults for my website, for fitness related stuff, biohacking related stuff, hormone related stuff. But like I said, I'm very, very, I vet everyone. They have to answer a questionnaire when they come in, and I ask them a bunch of series of questions. And if they don't answer the questions right, the money that they pay me, for whatever it is for 30 or 60 minutes is just refunded to them. I don't even talk to them. So I guess the answer is very simply that the type of person that I will work with is somebody who's truly committed to change, and is, in the AA and Alcoholics Anonymous, they have the statement, until a person is sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, that's the people that I attract.
Gotcha. So what's the best way for people to get in touch with you that they're interested in, changing their life and learning about all this hormone optimization?
Sure. I mean, the easiest way is I'm on, my website is jcampbell, Campbell.com. You can find me on social media at jcampbell333. And then obviously my company is BioLongevity Labs. We are going to be within the next 9 to 12 months, truly the Amazon of biohacking. We have all sorts of peptides, bioregulators, small molecules, various supplements, very, very tip of the spear, bleeding edge products that, in my opinion, over the next 12 to 15 months and even 2 years are going to really change what I call the biohacking industry from a standpoint of teaching people how to not rely on sick care, allopathic medicine, and do it themselves.
Gotcha. Well, very good. Well, thank you, Jay, for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Richard, thank you, brother. I appreciate it too.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.